everyone! In today's video, we're crafting with napkins to create beautiful custom pieces. Decoupage is a simple and easy way to add a personal touch to your projects. Hi, my name is Katie from Lady Red Crafting. Grab some napkins and let's get crafting. So I tend to collect a whole bunch of canvases. Whenever I see them at the dollar store and it's a different shape, color, size, I tend to pick them up and have them in my stash. So for this craft, we're going to start out with an 8x6 canvas. And what you see me doing here is I'm just taking a screwdriver and a pair of pliers, and I'm going to remove the canvas from the wood frame. Now that we have those taken apart, I'm going to start out with just the canvas piece. Next, I'm going to lay this canvas piece down on a paintable surface. I'm taking some painter's tape and I'm just going to tape that down to this piece of cardboard. And now that everything is secured and laid out, I'm grabbing some Mod Podge and I'm using the matte Mod Podge for this project. And we're just going to put a nice coat of Mod Podge over the top of this canvas. Now let's go ahead and set that aside to dry, and I'm going to prep my napkin. I found these beautiful napkins at Home Goods a few months ago, and I had to get them. I just loved how they had like a decorative background in the back side of this napkin and then the flowers over the top of it. And I think it just gave it a whole bunch of dimension and it looked amazing. So we're starting out by taking a little piece of painter's tape, and I'm just going to remove the bottom 2 layers of the napkin to prep that. Now let's grab our canvas with the dried on Mod Podge, and we're just placing the napkin over the top and just trying to find out where we want the napkin to be placed on top of this canvas. And I wanted it to look like the flowers were kind of around the outside of what I'm going to put in the center here. So this is how I decided to lay out my napkin. Now I'm going to grab a piece of parchment paper and lay that over the top of the napkin, and using my iron here, I'm just going to iron that on just to make sure everything stays into place. And what the iron does is it warms up the Mod Podge that has dried, and it allows the napkin to adhere really nicely to the top of the canvas. And by using the iron, you have like no wrinkles. So this is just a really good way to do your Mod Podge so it's nice and flawless. Now let's go ahead and take this off of our piece of cardboard, and I'm just using a quick pair of scissors here and cutting any excess napkin off of the canvas. And just to make sure I don't make a big mess, I do put this back on top of that piece of cardboard, and I grab my Mod Podge and I'm just going to do a top coat over the top of the napkin to make sure that everything is all nice and sealed. I'll set that aside to dry, and we'll go ahead and grab that wood frame. With this wood frame, I'm just taking my antique wax and I'm going to stain the outside of the frame. Now, I have these rub-on transfers that I've had for at least a year, probably 2. And I'm going to grab this one, and I want to cut out the one that says "Make It Happen." So I want to put this sign up in my office just to give me motivation. I'm going to take this rub-on transfer, and I use a piece of a paint stick. So I just cut that to size. I'm just going to set that right on top. Next, I'll grab a popsicle stick, and I'm just going to rub this on until everything is adhered to that paint stick. There was a little bit of overhang from that rub-on transfer, so I just kind of rubbed that down around the corners just so you couldn't see the bare wood. Next, I grabbed my burnt umber from Apple Barrel, and I'm just going to take a little bit of paint here, and I'm going to paint that around the outside of the edge of this little paint stick, just to make sure it looks nice and polished before I attach this to my sign. While we have the paint out, I did tape down this little heart cutout that I had from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to paint that with the same burnt umber paint. Originally, I thought I was just going to dry brush it really quickly, and that didn't work out, so we just painted the whole entire heart. Let's go ahead and put this all together. One of the things that I did notice after I was looking closer at the napkin, there was a little blue line, and it was not the whole way down on the napkin, but it was just a little bit, and it must have been maybe from printing the napkin or something like that. And so that is why I painted that heart a minute ago, is because I am going to use that heart to cover up that little spot, because I don't want to waste this beautiful napkin just because of that little imperfection. So I started out here by drawing a little line around the frame with my pencil so that I would know where I'm going to cut the canvas so that it will fit perfectly inside this frame. Once I'm satisfied with the canvas and the frame fitting together, I'm going to flip this over and I'll take that canvas off of the frame, and I'm going to use this Aleene's tacky glue. And this glue is great. If you don't have that, you could use hot glue or Elmer's glue or pretty much any glue that you have around the house. But this, I think, worked really well with the canvas and the wood. Once I have that all the way around the frame, we're going to just lay that canvas right back on top of the frame. Next, I grab my staple gun and I'm just going to add a few staples to make sure that everything stays in place. Now let's flip this over and decorate our sign here. And I'm grabbing the heart and making it happen. And at first I was going to do the heart with hot glue. And then I thought about it and I'm like, I don't want that hot glue to show through. So what I decided to do was I took that Aleene's tacky glue again, and I'm just going to put a little of it in a bowl, and I'm taking a paintbrush and I'm just going to paint that glue right over the top of the backside of the heart. And then once I've done that, I'm going to just place this over the top of the spot where that blue ink is on the napkin. And this covers that spot perfectly. And the glue here will dry clear, which is what I wanted because I didn't want all of those strings and things from the hot glue. And for the Make It Happen wood piece, I am going to use hot glue for this because you're not going to see that hot glue behind it because there's no holes in it. So I just did that really quickly and I placed that down underneath. And this sign is complete. And I just love how this sign turns out. I can't wait to display this in my office. As we kick off the new year, I've been thinking about expanding my creative skills. One skill I've been wanting to focus on is learning to draw. There's something so satisfying about improving your artistic ability, and I found the perfect way to do it. That's where Skillshare comes in. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes taught by industry experts. Whether you're looking to unlock your creative identity, drawing for beginners, learning to embroider, trying your hand at paper flower crafts, or learning to watercolor, Skillshare offers classes that help you take your career, hobbies, or side hustles to the next level. And with Skillshare's learning paths, you can follow curated, step-by-step class collections to master a specific skill. It's a great way to stay focused and see real progress. For me, I've been diving into a class called Learning to Draw. It's been such a fun and rewarding experience. The best part is, I'm learning at my own pace and gaining skills I can apply to my crafting projects. This is the year of creativity. Let's make 2025 our most creative year yet. Whether you're drawing, designing, or starting your own business, Skillshare has everything you need to bring your vision to life. And here's a special offer. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today and unlock your creative potential. Join Skillshare, explore new skills, and make 2025 your most creative year yet. So I found this adorable box at the Dollar Tree, and I just love the design on this box. And this is one of their new pieces in their Crafter Square section. And the first thing that I noticed about this box was how tight the lid fit. And I wanted to loosen that up just a little bit so this will be easier for us to add hinges to. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my zip sander and I'm using 80 grit sandpaper on this, and I'm just sanding the inside of the box so that way it'll be easier for us to put the lid on and off. Next, I'm going to take some of my apple barrel white paint and I'm going to put that in a little bowl, and I'm going to add just a little bit of water to this. What I'm trying to do is just thin that paint out just a little bit, so when I put this onto my box, it goes on more like a stain and less like a coat of paint. So I'm just going to completely coat my box here. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the lid. So now let's go ahead and prep our napkin. This napkin is from HomeGoods and I've used it before, and I just love that it's neutral. It has that gray and white tone to it. And I'm taking a piece of painter's tape and I'm just going to use that to remove both of these layers from the napkin, because we just want that top layer. And here's a little sneak peek of how this is going to look on our box. I'm just going to lay that on there, and you'll see with that white, it just brings everything out in that napkin. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of water and a paintbrush, and we're going to use this method to go ahead and just rip some pieces out of our napkin. And there's really no rhyme or reason to this. I just don't really want any straight edges when I'm putting this onto my box. And because we're not going to coat it completely, it's going to look like tattered or torn a little bit, like it's just kind of faded with this print on the box. So this is how we're going to do it, just random pieces just tore apart. Let's take our Mod Podge, and I'm using the matte finish Mod Podge, but you can use the glossy if that's more to your liking. And I am just going to paint a little bit of this Mod Podge onto the box, and I'm just doing one quadrant at a time. And I'm doing the whole entire thing just because I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to place this piece of napkin on here. And once I've decided where I want that napkin, I'm taking a piece of cling wrap and I'm just going to smooth out the napkin to get any wrinkles off. And we're just going to keep repeating this step until we get all of the quadrants of the box completely filled to your liking. So whatever you feel looks better to you. And now that our box is complete, I'm going to set this aside to dry. And let's grab our lid and let's start doing some decoupage on the lid. Just going to do a light coat of our Mod Podge on one quadrant of the lid. And once we get that complete, we're just going to lay down that napkin over the top and pat down using a piece of cling wrap to make sure everything is secure. I'm going to continue to do this across the whole entire lid, just putting little pieces of the napkin onto the box. Don't worry about us covering the decorative holes. We're going to go ahead and take care of that in a little bit. So for now, just get the placement of the napkins where you would like them. Set that aside to dry and grab our base of our box. And I'm taking the Mod Podge again, and I'll just do a quick sealing coat and let that dry. Now back to the lid. But for the lid, before we move forward, I'm going to take a small razor blade and I'm just going to go ahead and cut out any of the paper so that we can see that beautiful design. Now, once we have all of that paper removed, I am taking a fine tipped brush with my Mod Podge, and I'm just going to go ahead and seal my Mod Podge in on the lid. And using that fine tip brush, I'm able to get in between all of the layers. So that way, if there were any leftover pieces of napkin, it would just paint them down into the box, making them look like they're part of the box. Once everything is completely dry, I grabbed out these little hinges that I found at Lowe's. These were the smallest set of hinges that I could find there. And when I got them, the screws on them were still a little bit too long. I ended up having to go to a different hardware store to get shorter screws, and all they had left were 4. So I am only going to be putting one hinge onto this little jewelry box, which should be just fine. It's a very small box, but I would have liked to have put 2 hinges. Once I have my hinge in place, I am taking a little piece of painter's tape and I'm just going to tape down the hinge on both sides. So I'm going to take one of the screws and I'm just going to poke that into the hole on the hinge, and I'm just going to screw that down about halfway, and then I'm going to continue to do that on all 4 screws. Next, I'm just going to ensure that the hinge is working properly, and now I'm going to remove that painter's tape really carefully. And once that painter's tape is completely removed, go ahead and screw those screws all the way in to really secure that hinge. Now that everything is in place, some finishing touches. I'm just going back to using that white apple bear paint with a tiny bit of water added, and I'm just going to take that and just lightly brush around different areas of the box, just slightly blending everything in. I'm not really going over the whole entire thing, just lightly brushing where I think it needs it. If you get too much in one spot, I just take a little baby wipe and wipe it clean. Now, once that paint has completely dried, I grab my Sugar Metallic Space Gray, and I'm just going to put a little bit on my brush, not very much. It's very, very dry. And I'm just going to lightly dry brush around the whole entire box. And I'm saying really dry, very, very little. What I like about this paint, it has a slight sparkle to it, and I like that. It just kind of blends everything in and it gives everything like a finishing touch to the box. Now here is what our box looks like. We could leave it like this, but I wanted to add one little thing. This is just a thumbtack from the Dollar Tree that I'm cutting the top off because I like the little pearl on the top. And I'm taking some hot glue and I'm just going to hot glue that right to the center in the hole on the top of the box. And that is my final little piece for this box. This is ready for me to display on my dresser with some bracelets in it. I am very happy with how this turned out. You would never know that you bought this from the Dollar Tree and transformed it. And if you're enjoying this content and want to see more, please hit that subscribe button below. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you. I just love these palettes from the Dollar Tree, and for this project, we're going to take 2 of these palettes and attach them together. To do this, I'm going to flip them over onto the back side. And using some wood glue, I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of this glue and smush these 2 palettes together. And next, I'm going to grab my staple gun and just add a few staples to try to help put this together. And after I did that, I didn't feel like this was sturdy enough. So what I did was I took a popsicle stick and I'm just going to glue that in the center there to brace everything. But I'm only going to use a short piece so that way you can't see it through the palette. To attach this, I'm just using a little bit of wood glue and hot glue. After about 2 hours, this was totally ready for me to start working on. So we're going to go ahead and put this onto a paintable surface, and I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dry brush this paint onto my palette, but I didn't want it to be very thick on the palette. So what I wanted to do here is I took a little spray bottle of some water and I just spritzed the palette down and a little bit on where the paint was. And this helped just thin the paint out a little bit. So it was more like a stain and less like a paint. While we have the paint out, I'm going to go ahead and give a little coat of paint on these pine cone flowers that I made. And these are really easy to make. I just used some outdoor clippers with some pine cones that I had left over from Christmas. And if you want to see a more detailed description on how to make these, I do have a video that I'm going to link up here where I show how I make the pine cones from start to finish. So while everything is drying, I am going to prep my napkin. And I found this beautiful napkin at Home Goods, and I just love their selection on napkins. To prep this napkin, all I'm doing is removing the bottom 2 layers. So I use a little piece of painter's tape, and that helps assist me pull apart the layers from the napkin. Now let's go back to our palette board. I'm going to use some Mod Podge, and I'm just doing a nice layer of Mod Podge over the top of these wood pieces. Once that is completely dry, then we're going to apply the napkin. So with this napkin, I'm positioning it in the center of the napkin because of the borders on it. So we're just going to see the left and the right border. We won't see the top and the bottom border on our palette. After that, I grab a piece of parchment paper and I place that over the top of our napkin, and using my hot iron, I'm just going to iron that down, which will reactivate the Mod Podge and allow that napkin to stick nicely to those wood pieces. Next, we're going to take the Mod Podge and we're going to paint that Mod Podge over the top of just the wood pieces on the board. And what this is going to allow us to do is just kind of seal that napkin in prior to us sanding, so none of that accidentally sands off while we're sanding between the slats. This is when you need to pack your patience and just let that sit and dry. And once that is completely dry, and this did take a few hours, I then went back in with my zip sander, and I'm just going to sand in a downward motion all the way around the exterior of this board. Next, what I like about this zip sander is it's so small, it fits really nice inside the different slats in between. So you can just sand in between, and then I just take a little brush, a paintbrush, and I just dust off any extra napkin. And if you don't have a zip sander, don't worry, a piece of sanding paper will work as well. Otherwise, you can also use like a nail file or an emery board. That also will get in between those slats really nicely. So now for our final touches. I'm going to use this ribbon, and this ribbon I did get at Walmart. They have it usually all year round, but they definitely have it out during the fall season as well. What I like when they get them out at the fall season is that if they don't sell out, they do go on clearance right after fall before Christmas. So I usually pick up a few rolls of it then because I love this ribbon. And I'm just going to cut it to size and hot glue it to the back side of this piece just to make sure it sits nicely in the center of our piece. We're not going to stop there. I have this Simplicity ribbon as well, and this also came from Walmart. It does not have any wire in it at all. I think it's more of a trim piece, but I love this ribbon. And I'm just going to cut a small piece and put that in the center of our board and on top of that other ribbon. I found that the hot glue on the back side of the board was just enough to keep these ribbons in place, so I thought that was great. So now let's flip our board over, and I'm going to grab those pine cone flowers that we made earlier, and I'm just going to position the first one in the center of this board. And I had to use quite a bit of hot glue because it's a little bit of an uneven surface, and I go back and I add a little bit more hot glue. But once I got that glue down really well with the hot glue, it stayed perfectly. Now this next step is optional. I kept going back and forth on whether I wanted just the one pine cone flower or if I wanted to go with the 3 pine cone flowers. And eventually I just decided that I really like how one pine cone looked. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you would have done 1 flower or 3 flowers. And now here's our final decor piece. I love how this turns out. It's neutral but fun with that little bit of green in there.